This is Football at 4.
One of the things I think you have to be honest with yourself as a general manager is you assessed your problems, right? And Howie Roseman said, okay, I need better pass rushers. I need to fix my secondary, and I'm going to be okay, right? And so he does that. He gets Bryce Huff. He gets rid of Riddick. He keeps Sweat. But they haven't really fixed their D-line. Like, Jalen Carter got worn out. He played too many plays.
That was Mike Lombardi on the GM Shuffle podcast, asking whether or not this roster, did they do enough this offseason? Well, we'll get some thoughts on this roster, some of the offensive line, the passing game, the pass rush, the tackling issues, and more on today's edition of Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget to check out their YouTube channel. Search Inside the Birds. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And here to answer some of those questions with us now is Adam Caplan, here from Inside the Birds podcast on today's Football at 4. Adam, welcome back, my friend. How are you?
Doing well, Mike. Hope you are and your audience. And yeah, it's wow. This team is interesting. Like there's no question about it. It's kind of like one day to the next. You have no idea. 1 week to the next, you don't know what you're going to get from this team. Right when you think you know. Although, look, they had some certain challenges on offense because the two best receivers were out, and that brings up a roster issue, which you were talking about. And you should know that because we have the time this week on Inside the Birds, we're going to delve into their signings, what we know from behind the scenes, how they're producing, not producing, why they're not producing, why they are doing well, why they're not doing well. We're going to get into that, Mike. We've got a lot of time with the team on a bye, so we're going to the draft. We're going to look at their draft. We're going to look at their past 3 drafts, not just this one. We're going to go into a lot how the coaching has been behind the scenes from what we understand. A lot of stuff we wouldn't talk about here on Football at 4 because we don't have the time, and we have on our podcast usually do an hour show. So we look forward to that, and also tonight with Greg Cosell, only for Patreon. Patreon.com/Inside the Birds. We're going to have Greg for half an hour with our members, and they take over. They kind of run it. They ask the questions, Greg responds, and they have some great conversations. I cannot wait for this one tonight. I've not talked to Greg so far this week. I can't imagine the tape's very good, but we'll find out tonight.
Yeah, this is one of those bye weeks where it's the self-scouting. What did you find out about your team? And this is a team that at 2-2, you're 500. Yet it seems like there's more questions than absolutes here. So let's get some final thoughts on the things that we saw in Tampa, and then the big picture here of Jalen Hurts. What did we see from Hurts? Obviously, they're shorthanded at receiver. They're shorthanded on the offensive line with Lane Johnson out. We know the history of this team when he is out. But give us some thoughts on what we saw from Jalen Hurts' game and how he either contributed or helped this team in the loss to Tampa.
Yeah, Mike, this is just me, based on the information I have. I really do think two things. The offensive line issues and the protection had its issues, right? Fred Johnson, particularly at right tackle, filling in for Lane Johnson. This is the one game where it really showed me that Hurts was worried about not having Brown and Smith, not having Lane Johnson at right tackle. He just seemed to react to not only pressure, but pressure wasn't there, not taking throws that were there. You could only blame, Mike, not having the two great receivers. You could blame it. You could put the blame on him on that for the reasons, but you also have to be able to hit passes that are there. And Jalen has not really done that this season. I saw a lot of this last season when he really struggled. It had nothing to do with injuries. It was more that, okay, this throw was there. Why didn't he make the throw? We're really seeing a lot of that this season. Now, Mike, he also is capable. Really strong arm. That's never been a problem. That's the one attribute that he has not lost. Like, he doesn't run that well anymore, Mike. We don't talk enough about that. He doesn't look like the same runner from 2 years ago. Let's call it like it is. He's just not. The tape shows it. There's certain stuff you can't challenge. The tape does not lie. We brought this up last year, and Inside the Birds, Hurts doesn't look like the same runner he once was. Then he got hurt. He had the knee injury. Well, he clearly does not. He looks sluggish. He's in fine shape, and he looked good in training camp with it. But man, he looks sluggish running it. But the one issue, Mike, that has not changed, he's got a strong arm that's never been in question. Once Smith and particularly Brown gets back, you're gonna see that deeper passing game come back. But there's just so many things that have happened this season, Mike, that you can't really predict. You could talk about in training camp, oh, we saw the lack of pass rush. Okay, that's happened. It's been terrible in the regular season. But I was expecting when the scheme, we talked about this, Mike, when Kellen Moore was hired. The first nugget we had is we talked to coaches that work with Kellen Moore. The first thing we were told back in February was that this is a quarterback-friendly scheme. Quarterbacks love playing in it. I don't quite understand what's going on, why it has not been as good. Look, Kellen's he's got a good scheme here. We've seen some really good things. But why has Hurts not been good enough yet? That's a big question based on what you asked me.
Well, let's before we get to the offensive line issues, because they certainly had their problems there, Fred Johnson. But the passing game, without Brown and Smith, how much does that change the passing game when you've got Dotson, Johnny Wilson, and Paris Campbell? And I got to say, it looks like Hurts just has a complete lack of trust in those guys.
That's the point. Like, I get it. Johnny Wilson shouldn't be out there, okay? He's a blocking receiver. Sounds kind of comical, but that's what he is. He doesn't run well enough. He can't get open on his own. If you've got if Jahan Dotson was a good number 3, he clearly is not. He's just struggling. To be honest with you, if Brown and Smith are playing Dotson's the 3, look, you'd rather have someone else as the 4. Wilson's not. By the way, Britton Covey was doing very well. By the way, okay, he's doing pretty well before he suffered the shoulder fracture. You'd have Wilson just come in and block. That's it. Okay, he just can't. He can't really help you as a receiver. Paris Campbell, by the way, is now on the practice squad. He did score on a raw to the right, kind of more of a scramble. Paris Campbell's a 4 or 5 at this point, right? Then you got the John Ross issue. John Ross, Mike, let's not forget, John Ross was cut before the 53. The initial 53 is set. Nobody wanted him. He wasn't even on anyone's practice squad. The reason why the Eagles brought him back is because they ran out of receivers. So, look, I get that part. That's not Jalen's fault. But there were times these guys got open. They didn't get the football. I can't. That plays to your point. Maybe he doesn't trust, and it's a very fair point. Well, the non-trust hurts the football team. You got to pull the trigger, and Jalen's got the longest snap to release numbers in the NFL. That's not good. It's taking way too long for him. He's still indecisive, Mike. We saw a ton of this last season. There's some stuff that he controls, Mike. He doesn't control who's available. He does control when there's guys open on the throat. That's on him.
Well, and listen, all around the league, I know you look at in Washington, Zacchaeus did nothing here. He's been a productive receiver for that team. I know, by the way, Brian Johnson is on that staff, and he doesn't seem to be an idiot any longer. That said, Sterling Shepard is coming off the practice squad. He's out there making plays. And I get it. He has Evans and Godwin that take more of the attention. But when Shepard has a ball thrown to him, he's making a play. So there are some times where you have to say, hey, the guys are out there. You have to trust them to make the play. So I don't know if that's more on Hurts or more on the lack of talent that they have.
Mike, and we'll find out from Greg Cosell tonight how open these guys got. Look, John Dotson's a problem. We reported this exclusively when they made the trade. We told our Patreon members exactly why the Washington wanted him off the roster. Lack of competition, just not competing.
Yeah.
Not being ready. It was pretty bad. And, Mike, he's been a big disappointment here so far.
And as Mosher said yesterday on Football at 4, he took a lot of heat from people saying, because he said, you gave up a 3rd-round pick for this guy, and he thought that was a little bit of a high number for a guy who really hasn't done much.
Mike, it really should have been like a 6. It could have been a 5 based on production or snap counts or something.
Yep.
Now, listen, with Dotson, the only thing I'll defend is 3 schemes. He's had to learn 3 schemes. He had the first one with Ron Rivera that he had to learn, right? He had that one, which also changed, by the way, when Scott Turner was let go. Then you've got the Cliff Kingsbury offense coordinator. He came in, had to learn that one. And then now he had to learn the Kellen Moore offense. By the way, they're all different. All 3 schemes are different. That's not Dotson's fault. What's Dotson's fault is competing and making yourself a pass target. I could tell you as a fact, Washington did not want him. I don't know if they would have cut him, but I know that they were going to find any way to get him off the roster via trade, and they found in their division, Mike, how could you defend that, right? If you're the biggest Eagles fan, how can you defend the fact that Washington said, we're fine trading to our division? What does that tell you?
Yeah, sometimes things feel too good to be true, and now maybe you're seeing why. Let's, the offensive line we hinted at, issues. You had Fred Johnson, not Lane Johnson. You then had Juergens leave. Dickerson had to move over and play some center. You had Steen go in. So they had all sorts of issues up front. But, man, 6 sacks in the game. What were the problems with the offensive line up front?
Yeah, and they didn't handle the blitz well, Mike. See, these delayed blitzes, I thought Todd Bowles really, his scheme was really, really good. I thought he did a great job of making Hurts kind of indecisive. By the way, they know Fred Johnson. He was cut by the Bucs 2 years ago, so they know Fred Johnson. It's sort of a reclamation project for Jeff Stoutland. It did work well there. There's no question. They had protection issues on their left side, by the way. Cam Jurgens is a good football player. That's one thing. That's one positive. He's played well. We haven't really talked about him very much. He's unfortunately left due to, hydration.
Yeah, cramps.
That didn't help. And the cramps. The other thing is, Mike, I do want to mention, I understand they couldn't go down there early to Tampa because of the weather, the hurricane issue, but it's one thing if there are one or two players of hydration or cramp issues, but it was at least a half a dozen, Mike. That's on their training staff. I don't know what the hell happened there. That's disappointing. That should not have happened. I understand. We talked about this on our Friday show on Inside the Birds. Keep an eye on the weather because it's going to be in the low 90s. The real field temperature is supposed to be in the high 90s. Guess what? It wound up being 110 plus. I get that, but you got to do a better job getting your guys ready.
It was brutal down there, as you could see, all over the place on the television. Just everybody who Sal Powell in the morning doing the hits on ESPN, he was sweating away. What's her name on ESPN or Fox sideline? Erin Andrews, she was sweating away. So you could tell. It was Brady mentioned it over and over on the broadcast how hot it was and how much of a advantage they thought it was early in the season to play home games. That said, the offensive line issues, a big problem for them, and they hope to get Lane. I guess Lane wanted to play. He didn't clear, so he should be back, when they play. The passing game, we would imagine that Brown and Smith will both be back after the bye?
Well, Brown for sure, barring something. He'd have to have a setback. Smith, let me just explain something, Mike. I've covered concussions for nearly 25 years, and I know the protocol pretty well. He didn't progress. Mike, he was never even out there at practice. That you worry about light sensitivity issues, which Lane Johnson didn't have, by the way. Lane was there, seen on Wednesday. And Lane also wound up practicing a little bit.
And he traveled with the team.
Yep, and he traveled. In fact, Jay Glazer, my old friend Jay from Fox Sports, Jay said he talked to Lane. We should mention this. He talked to Lane. Lane said he passed Saturday. Now, I don't know if Lane passed it when he got there in Tampa, or did he pass Saturday morning? But he passed, and then Sunday morning, he said two doctors. Glazer didn't mention, were they team doctors? We don't know. They decided to hold him out, which they're allowed to do. By the way, you should know with the protocol, you have to pass the team doctors testing, and the final one is with the independent neurologist. But I don't know why a couple of doctors held him out. Look, with Lane's history, I get that. But we'll obviously monitor this. So he'll definitely be back unless he has a setback. But let's just cool our jets with Devontae. Let's let him get out there and practice, start working before we say he's definitely playing.
All right.
But the Eagles, because I've learned my lesson. I had a report at ESPN when I was told by a source close to Jay Cutler he was playing. He had a headache. He had a slight headache, Mike. And when you have a slight headache, by the way, with the protocol, you have to go back to step one. You can't pass then. No matter what day of the week it is, you have to start over. So you have to know that going in. But I just, Mike, one thing I do want to mention, the Eagles now have learned that they're going to have to do a better job of evaluating their backup receiver group. I understand there's always going to be a downgrade. My mom knows that when you go from Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. But they've got to do a better job of getting better backups in there. They've got this is on Howie Roseman and his personnel staff. They've got to do a better job of bringing in players here that could compete at a higher level. This is just not acceptable.
Yeah. By the way, some breaking news: Devontae Adams has informed the team he'd like to be traded. So there's a guy who's pretty good. But
did you see this one?
He's not coming here, by the way.
By the way, Antonio Pierce favorited.
Yes.
Had a favorite on social media. Antonio, my old friend from ESPN.
The social media stories that are happening right now in the NFL, it's too much, man. The Slay, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White on Sunday, it's becoming too much. Huff scrubbing his account like many. It's just becoming too much.
Yeah, exactly. It is, it's a world we live in, but 9 times out of 10 these things don't become a story, but the Devontae Adams one's clear because he's had enough. And it seems like the Raiders, who I remember talking to in the spring about Adams, is like, no, we're trying to win. Here's the thing, Mike, they're 2-2. I know it's very early. They have nobody who could replace Devontae Adams. I would think they want to get a receiver back, but we'll see.
All right, let's look at a couple of the pass rush and the tackling. Today I thought Fangio was interesting. He's saying, well, we told the corners that they needed to get closer to the line. They just didn't do it. I thought that was bizarre. Bad tackling. He said 15 missed tackles. So, in other words, did we put players in position to make plays and they just didn't make them? And the pass rush has been a constant problem.
Let's go to the latter first. The pass rush is – we talked on Football at 4 a lot in training camp, preseason, that there was a major concern with the pass rush. Obviously, I underestimated it. It's so bad, Mike. I can't believe this. The Eagles have always had a good pass rush, sometimes better than others. I'd have to actually look it up. I can't remember an Eagles front seven being this bad getting to the quarterback. This is almost historically bad. Yes, they got their edges, got their first 2 sacks, still inconsequential. It's just, I don't know, Mike. Huff he's been a big zero. He's wearing number 0. He hasn't done it. He clearly cannot be a stand-up pass rusher. The Eagles do play some wide 9, which is what he played in, by the way, with the Jets. They do that nickel, but it's not working. He's not comfortable in it. And Fangio said today, we don't drop him much. Well, he's not comfortable, right? Jalen Carter got doubled. He just couldn't get to the quarterback. We know Jordan Davis can't rush the passer at all. Josh Sweat is not the player he once was. He's trying, and he's making an effort. Nolan Smith has done next to nothing, Mike. BG's doing what he can. He still could play. They don't have a quality pass rusher right now. They just don't, Mike. There's nothing they can do. Jalen Sun, by the way, we should mention, got his first snaps on defense. He got 5. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Yep, the pass rush has been terrible, and the tackling, I don't know how you get any better at that at this stage of the season.
Well, you know what's interesting, Mike? There are a couple teams that will tackle in season only a couple times for a very short time. Like you might do 3 minutes in a practice just to get used to doing it. But as Sirianni talked about it, you can't get your players hurt in season. You just can't. So that's why teams generally don't do it. You watch tape. Fangio talked about it today. You work on technique. But you can't. You could do a thud period, which is use an elbow or shoulder, but you don't take them to the ground. That's what thud is. They got a problem. Like now, Bill Polian, the Hall of Fame general manager, told us at Inside the Birds a couple years ago that it's between the first 4 and 6 weeks tackling is bad around the NFL. It usually evens itself out, but it's going to take some time.
All right, Adam Caplan. Let's. It's funny. We all preseason we take a look at the different teams. Go inside the NFC East, and here are, as you would call them, the Commandos.
I can't believe it. Yeah,
woo, baby, 3-1, and they look like they're ascending upwards, while Philly and Dallas look like they're going backwards.
Yeah. So with the Commanders, look, they got blown out week 1 in Tampa, right? They've been good since then. Now they've had a very good schedule, and guess what? They play the awful Browns this week. They host them. Then they play at the Ravens. They'll probably lose that. They don't have to go very far. Then they host the Panthers and the Bears. So they could actually, and I think they might play the Eagles after that. But so this is set up very well. The Cowboys, who are 2-2, they have a tough schedule. They're at the Steelers, they host the Lions, they're at the Niners, and at the Falcons, Mike. And they're 2-2, and they're not playing particularly well. They got very lucky against the Giants. That phantom call on the Giants for the hold. It was a face mask on the defender. That was terrible. The Giants, who lost that game, they're 1-3. They're at Seattle. They host the Bengals. Then they host the Eagles and at the Steelers. They're more competitive, Mike, than probably most people thought. Daniel Jones playing a little bit better. But the Commanders are the one. I know they were the sexy pick, and I didn't quite agree with it. It's just very early, Mike. They've had a good schedule, and I give them credit. They've been able to win it, and Jane Daniels processes extremely well for a rookie. He's so far ahead, Mike, of most rookie quarterbacks. But let's see what happens when their schedule gets better or harder. But they're a great story, no question about it.
All right, before we rock out of here on this Football at 4, Adam Caplan, Fangio, a couple quick things on some injury stuff. Sidney Brown, they said they could open the window for him. So let's start with him. If Sidney Brown is healthy and active, does he have a role on this defense?
Well, certainly not week 1. He hasn't practiced since January. So, as Vic said, they got to start working him in practice. But whenever he gets clear to play, yeah, look, it's we know that Gardner Johnson and Blankenship are starters, okay? That's not going to change anytime soon. But Gardner Johnson, by the way, he's got to tackle better, Mike. That's a problem.
Big time.
Yeah,
time.
And by the way, he's not making the plays like he used to, where he was elite 2 years ago. Mike, when healthy, he was phenomenal. So that's something to watch. That look, they have very poor safety depth, and they can't play Tristan McCall in these kind of snaps that they did in this game. And we know that that this is not that advantageous. But it'll just be a situation where they'll have to figure out his role because Vic has never coached him, and that's certainly and the DB's coach wasn't working with him before, so they'll work that in and they'll figure that out. But he'll be their top backup safety once he's ready.
All right, Cooper DeJean, what's the read on what his future might be?
Yeah, and he only played one snap on defense, Mike. But what we had said before the season started, their plan was before he got hurt is he was going to compete for a nickel role. Well, it just so happens Avonte Maddox is not playing particularly well. So we expect Maddox to start losing that job, losing snaps to DeJean going forward after the bye. And I know Cooper, the other thing is, Mike, DeJean right now is their punt returner, and they got to get their special teams right. Man, these gaps, Mike, are embarrassing. This can't happen. At least they had the great play by Isaiah Rodgers. Obviously, Rodgers had a bonehead play, which can't happen. They have to figure out, and Nia Smith also, by the way, could punt return later on when he comes off IR. But if DeJean starts playing a nickel and they decide to take him off punt returns, then they're going to have to take a look at, well, who else can do it. That to me is not easy because they don't really have a natural punt returner. Isaiah Rodgers is a better kickoff returner. So is Will Shipley, by the way. So is Gainwell. I have to go back and look at my notes and see who else. Paris Campbell could punt return, by the way. By the way, he's out of elevations, Mike. So if they want to own the roster, they'd have to sign him off and release somebody or make room for him.
Great. All right, there you go. Football 4, Adam Caplan. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can download on all podcasting platforms. And check out the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds and get their Patreon stuff. Greg Cosell is going to be their guest. It's going to be a really good one. And, of course, Football at 4 all week right here on the Sports Bash. All right, Adam. Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.